Well, thank you very much for your hospitality. It's been very, very nice, and it's nice to be with you. I hope I can make it interesting. If I had to give a sort of a title to what we're talking about, it would be the ABC of the RAF. And I'm sure you know the world is full of abbreviations. RAF, NA, RN, NHS. I'm very familiar with that. Thinking of that, my daughter is the ward manager of the coronary care unit at Warwick Hospital, and I was talking to her about this. She said, "Oh, we had that abbreviations on the ward," and I said, "Well, what was that?" She said, "When the surgeon has done his operations in the theatre, he sends a progress report down to the ward, and on the bottom of the document was M&MI. And she hadn't a clue what it meant. So she said, when the surgeon came down, she said, "What's this M&MI?" She said, "Oh, it may not make it." Then we got to another one, it was TFBNDY. And she said, "Well, what's that?" She said, "Total failure, but not dead yet." And he didn't say failure. But the abbreviations in the services are wide known. I'm sure you're quite well aware yourself of all the abbreviations you have to use in navigation and flying. And I was first introduced to this in the services when I was the age of 16, when I joined the LDV, and that was the forerunner of the Home Guard. The LDV, we used to call it Look, Duck and Vanish. And then of course we became the Home Guard, and we had to change our uniform, which meant we took an LDV armband off and stuck an HG one on. And I was guarding the Tyne Bridge in Newcastle with a broomstick. It was really ridiculous when you think of it, but it was training and exercise. But for my sins, I eventually ended up in the Air Force. In those early days of the war, well, throughout the war as well, everybody at the age of 18 was called up and had to join the services, and they could be directed into any of the services, even going down the mines to become a Bevan boy. And Iron Bevan was the Minister of Labour then, and he used to send people down the mine to get them behind the coal for the ships and the tanks. So I thought, well, I don't fancy that. But at the age of 17, you could volunteer and have some sort of choice of what service you went into. So I told Mum and Dad, I'm going to volunteer to join the Navy. And they said, well, yes, go on. With your health, you'll never get in. As a youngster, I was desperately ill. I was critically ill as a baby. I had mucus diphtheria, hence my voice was still a bit funny. I had typhoid, I had everything that was going on. And my mother nursed me at home with this diphtheria, which was quite a something. Mum had been a matron at a military hospital, and I left there and came to live in Newcastle, left Shotley Bridge in County Durham, came to live in Newcastle, and at the age of 10, 11, I got TB, and TB bowel, and I was confined to bed for a long, long time, couldn't get out of bed. So at the age of 12, I was in a wheelchair, and the medicines I was taking were M&B and sulfanilamide. The family teeth weren't very good, but at the age of 16, I had all my teeth out. And then when Mum and Dad said, yes, you can go and volunteer, they knew full well that I'd never get in. So this was all local, so I went out to the local recruiting office, recruited a school, and at the school at the door with the Navy, I was just about to go in, and I saw the recruiting officer, naval recruiting officer, and the medical officer there was my own doctor, Dr. Wright. So I thought, if I go in there, I'll never get in. So I went next door and joined the Air Force. And I think they must have been very desperate. Do you want to come down the front? Please do if you want to, you know. I'm quite harmless. Takes me a bit of time to raise my eyebrows. Yes, so there I was accepted to join the Air Force. And that was just to join the Air Force. And I was sent up to Manchester, to Heaton Park, where we were sworn in. We didn't get the King's Shilling in those days, just swore in on the Bible. And they had some minor testings there, and they said, well, you can train as aircrew. And I thought, oh my God, never thought what I was going to be. So anyway, the next step was to go down to London to ACRC, Aircrew Reception Centre, where they do very extensive tests, acceptance tests, medicals. All our medicals were done in the long room at Lord's. It's amazing. What they used to do, we were based in St John's Wood by the zoo, but when we went out to Lord's for the medical, we all lined up, about 30 or 40 of us, all lined up, only in our shorts and underpants, our hands on our hips. The nurses went down each side of the hypodermic and jabbed in your arm. If anybody fainted, they just did them on the floor. And then, of course, they had what they called an FFI, free from infection. And the doctor would come up with a little stick and said, right, drop your underpants and go down and make sure you're all clean. The disturbing bit was he said when he went down the back, he said, bend over. But anyway, that was sort of the medicals we had. But the attestation and the aptitude testing was very, very thorough. And much to my amazement, down there, they said I could train as a pilot. And this was under what they called a PNB scheme, Pilot Navigator Bomber. So if you started off as a pilot, and you weren't a failure, but if you couldn't cope as a pilot, you became a navigator or a bomber or another crew member. So much to my amazement, I was told I could train as a pilot. So then the next step was we forgot about aeroplanes and we went down to an ITW, Initial Training Wing. This was down at Newquay in Cornwall, and there you were learning how to salute, square bashing, marching, and service history, which was, I found fascinating, quite fascinating. And from there, when you finished there, and you passed out there, you were posted overseas. They had what they called the Empire Training Scheme, ETS, the Empire Training Scheme. Mainly the Commonwealth countries were teaching people flying and navigation. Mainly because in this country we had rationing, we had blackouts, we had air raids. So we were all trained, well, 99% of us were trained overseas. So I was posted down to South Africa, down to Johannesburg, down to South Africa. Went up to East Kirby, and West Kirby, sorry, and waited till we get on the boat. Everybody left, and there were 11 of us left in this room, and everybody left. We lived in the naffy for a week, until they sent all the WAFs in, all the girls came in. And all these girls came in, and the WAF officer found these 11 Ws, 11 blokes in this room, and they said, what on earth are you doing here? I said, well, we were due, oh, you're draft dodging. I said, no, you're draft dodging. So we were posted down to Brighton on the B course, the bad boys course. And we had to get up first thing in the morning and gallop down up and down the parade, book in at night. We ran everywhere doing all sort of menial tasks. And we complained to the orderly officer. They didn't want to know. So we wrote a letter, we all 11 of us all signed it, and sent it off to the station commander. And we were called into his office, and he said, this constitutes mutiny. Court-martial. So we did explain to him what had happened, but very kindly he accepted what was going on, and he tried to find out what was going on, realised that we had been left off a draft, and he said, well, just nothing I can do about it, just wait until we find you somewhere else. So we had a fortnight's holiday from Brighton, mainly in Sherry's Bar, which was great. A bit of a bore, mind you. But then, of course, we had to start again because all our kit had gone, all our records had gone. So I started our initial training week again at Stratford-on-Avon, and that was nice. That was great, but it was quite simple because we'd already done it, and we finished that course quite quickly. That took about 6 weeks, and then of course we had to think about aeroplanes. You go and fly aeroplanes. To start with, you had to prove that you could fly. So we were sent to Console, the little aerodrome at Wolverhampton, which was a civilian aerodrome, a bit like here, I suppose. And there, with the private instructor, we went solo on the Tiger Moth. And as soon as you'd gone solo, after about 8 or 10 hours, he said, right, you're okay. So there we are, we were stuck on a boat at Liverpool, and off we went to Canada. We ended up at St John's, landed there, and then went out to a place called Moncton PDC, Pilot Distribution Centre at Moncton, waiting for a posting to an aerodrome. And we were posted right out west to a little aerodrome called De Winton, just south of Calgary. And that was wonderful. And 3.5 days on the train, which was, I never experienced anything like that at all. The other thing we hadn't experienced was we went out for a meal when we got there on our own, and we'd heard about T-bone steaks and this sort of thing. We'd never ever seen one. And we said, let's have a T-bone steak. And we had this T-bone steak which was hanging over the plate. We'd never seen meat like it before. And of course we enjoyed that. When we came to leave the little restaurant, the chap said, no, it's all right, it's all been paid for. So somebody had seen us and paid our bill. And this is the hospitality we had. The hospitality from the Canadians really was excellent, really was. And it made life so much pleasanter. I had my first girlfriend there, Dorothy. Her dog walked on the seat.
A lot of meaning behind that.
Yeah, well, don't tell everybody. Yes, by growing up, I'd never seen a girl in my life because I was being so ill. I didn't go out very much at all. So Dorothy was a nice girl, but her mum and dad were very, very strict indeed. No nonsense going on at all. But they fed me and looked after me, and really was wonderful. Dorothy and I kept in touch with each other until 10, 15 years ago when she died, and she had 4 kids and I had 4 kids. So it was really was a wonderful experience to see what the hospitality they offered us. Not just me, but everybody. Fortunately, we were there when the Calgary Stampede was on, and we were invited to go to the Calgary Stampede and see all these chuck wagons and things. It really was wonderful. And on that course, my instructor was an ex-Battle of Britain pilot, and the Americans were just across the border from Boeing. They'd sent up 300 Stearman aircraft for the Air Force to learn flying. So we've been flying Tiger Moth a little bit, but I did most of my training on the Stearman. Remarkable airplane, wonderful airplane. I wasn't getting on very well. I was a little bit slow, and the instructor said, you better have a washout check, see if you're fit to carry on. So I had this washout check, and it seemed to go off all right. He said, right? He said, that's all right. Do you want to carry on? I said, yes, please. So he said, right. So really from then on, I never really looked back at all. It was quite an amazing experience. Because at the end of the course, why they asked us, I don't know. But at the end of the course, they said, what do you want to join, Fighter Command or Bomber Command? And you can imagine about 99% of us said Fighter Command. So I was close to the Bomber Command. Which was fine. I would never make a good fighter pilot. I was too stodgy. So down onto the prairie, back down onto the prairies into Saskatchewan, Medicine Hut and Moose Jaw, where we started to fly the airspeed Oxford. And that was great. When you finished that course, we had experiences on that course. Funny enough, it helped us later on operational flying. There was only 2 pilots. One acted as pilot, one acted as navigator, and he swapped over halfway around. And I was actually his navigator. We flew down over the lakes in Canada, down across country, and a chap he was flying said, hey, let's go low fly over there. We weren't supposed to get below 250 feet, but we went right down over the lakes, and a flock of ducks rose up in front of us. And we clattered through these ducks, and a duck wrapped around my face. Ducks in the engine. The engines were all right. Ducks in the cell. The engines actually were all right. But when we got back, the CEO wasn't very pleased about that at all. But I think the fact that we got the aircraft back helped us enormously, so we were allowed to carry on. Next day, I had to go and see the doc, just the usual medical. And he said, hey, he said, you were the bloke who was flying LX? Yes, I said, yes. He said, we had duck for dinner last night. But that experience helped us an awful lot later on in operational flying. It's amazing. So there we are. When you became a cadet, an aircrew cadet, you put a white flash in your cap. This little white flash in your cap, and you're a UT aircrew, you know, not exactly set you apart, but you're UT aircrew. And at the Service Flying Training School, SFTS, flying the Oxford, when you'd finished that, they took that little white flash off and they stuck your wings on, sewed your wings on. So I got my wings at the age of 19. It's incredible, you know, 19-year-old. So naive, we had never experienced life like the boys do and girls do now. But anyway, there we all got our wings, and of course we had to really get back home. So we forgot about aeroplanes, and we travelled back 3 days across Canada, back to the other side, down to New York, where we joined the Queen Mary. We come back home, and the Queen Mary wasn't in convoy, just set off, and there were 17,000 of us on board. And, I had a first-class cabin with 8 others. We slept in bunks in his but it really was a wonderful experience. We lost 2 people overboard, but the boat didn't stop and just zigzagged off. Threw a couple of lifebelts over and just carried on. Came back to Gourock, then with a little bit of rehabilitation on the Oxford again, at Kidlington and Croughton, at Oxford. And then, of course, we had to start thinking about operational flying. So we were posted to an OTU, an operational training unit. And this was at Castle Donington, and this is, of course, now East Midlands Airport. And that was quite an experience. There you had to acquire, you weren't given a crew, you had to get a crew. Crew of a Wimpy, there was 5 at a crew of a Wimpy, and we'd never had a crew before. So you had to get a crew. So what they did, got all the pilots, all the navigators, all the bomb aimers, all the wireless operators, the gunner, stuck them all in a big room and said, sort yourself out of the crews. And you had no idea. He said, I'm short of a navigator, would you like to fly with me? You know, this sort of thing was going. You had no idea of the people's backgrounds or their abilities. But I was so lucky. I acquired, we had a crew of 5. When we ended up with the day, we had a crew of 4. 2 wireless operators were missing. The officer in charge said, well, we sent everybody in, and eventually found these 2 wireless operators hiding in the loo. So they got those out. One was Little Taffy, the other one was a chap called Gaz Wetton, and my friend Paul Zanke, who's as another pilot, we tossed up between us, and I lost, and I got this little Welshman, Little Taffy. And Gats went and joined Paul, and he was shot down and killed on his first operation flying. So how luck plays a big part in your life. So Little Taffy, oh, he's a rebel. I think he was brought up in Aberdare in his uncle's pub, and he never lost the love of that, I think. he really was a bit of a rebel, wonderful, and very, very efficient. But we did have problems with him. After the war and we left, he became one of my best friends. He was a lovely chap, great fellow. Welshman, but nevertheless he was a great fellow. No, he wasn't. So, there you are, we've got a crew. So at the operational training unit, you were starting to think about operational flying, where you did bombing exercises, and what they call fighter affiliation, how to escape from attacking fighters, and navigation cross countries. And that seemed to go off very well. And at the end of that, end of OTU, you had to think about flying on the big stuff. So we went to HCU, Heavy Conversion Unit. This was at Brighton in Lincolnshire, and there we were started flying the Halibag. These were all Halifaxes that had been withdrawn off the operational flight. If you remember, they took the Halifaxes off and built a new Halibag, which came on later on. So all these ones we got were all the clapped out things that they couldn't fly on operational flying. So that was a bit dicey, but anyway, we got on all right. And then when you finished that course, did about 20 hours on those. And then, of course, they had, on the same unit, they had an LFS, a Lancaster Finishing School. So you just changed from one hut to another and started to fly Lancasters. Again, the Lancasters were aircraft that had been withdrawn as unfit for operational service. The casualty rate in learning to fly in Bomber Command was about 25%. It was remarkable. Fortunately, we survived. But there again, at the Heavy Conversion units, on Lancasters, I was having little problems again with my flying. Because although my height was all right, I've got little short legs. And when you've got 4 engines with 3,000 revs on the props going around on takeoff, you get tremendous torque. With my little short, I had a hell of a job keeping these things straight down the road. But my friend Paul, he was very efficient. He was posted off to 101 Squadron when he finished the course. And I finished my course a couple of days later, and I said to the flight commander, "Can I go and join Paul on 101 Squadron?" He said, "Well," he said, "it's a special duty squadron, we only send the best ones there." That was a bit of a calm down. So anyway, very next day he called me in the office and said, "Right, Waughman, 101 Squadron, off you go." I said, "Oh, change of heart?" He said, "No." He said, "It's the squadron with the highest attrition rate in the service. And I have the first call on the availability of aircrew. Off you go." The day I arrived on the squadron, my friend Paul had been shot down and killed the night before. So I never did see him again. And that was when you first really started to realise war's a serious business. People shoot at you, you know. So that really was quite an alarming time to start with there. This was in November 1943. And this was just at the beginning of the Battle of Berlin, when Harris was laid on this, what did he call it? He said, he wrote to the Air Ministry saying, we can wipe out Berlin from end to end. We can win the war. It'll cost us 400 to 500 aircraft if the Americans would come and join us. We could win the war. The Americans couldn't come in and join them. So that's partly why he was left to do the Battle of Berlin on his own, which wasn't a huge success. But there we are, there, thinking, a chap like that, building in, he's going to lose 400, 500 aircraft. It wasn't just the aircraft, there's 7, 8 members of the crew on each aircraft, quite a lot. But people had to do that in wartime, that's wartime. So there we are. When I was at Heavy Conversion Unit and posted to this special duty squadron, I said to the flight commander, "What's this special duty then?" He said, "Oh, you'll find out." So I found out very much later, he hadn't a clue what it was. It was kept very, very secret indeed. And what it was, it was a system. We had an extra crew member given to us, a German-speaking chappie, who could work the equipment on the aircraft. And this all started down in the south of England, where there were 15 stations, all with very fluent German-speaking operators on board. He could tune into the German night fighter controllers and they could give false instructions or jam the signals. And it had a name of Jostle because of the noise it was sending out. And it also had given a code name of Corona. So it became cigar, so it became ground cigar. But it only had a range of 130 miles. So it couldn't cover the deep penetration rays into Europe. So a very crafty gentleman called Sidney Bufton in the air ministry said, let's put it in an aeroplane. So they said he's going to put it in an aeroplane. So they chose 100 Squadron to have this equipment fitted. But 100 Squadron was going to have H2S, that's the ground scanning radar. And the power unit on the Lanc couldn't cope with both. So they said, right, we'll get the next squadron down. So 101 Squadron had this equipment, this cigar equipment. It was amazing thing it was. What happened was we had this special equipment on board, and you see on the aircraft, you can't see it from there, but oops, we had 3 7-foot aerials, 2 on the top and 1 under the nose, and they were transmitters, and the special duty operator could use these to jam 3 aircraft, 3 instructions at a time, jam fighters. Sadly, because of the nature of it, we were staggered on every bombing raid. We were staggered every 90 seconds right there at the bombing raid, because we had a range of 50 miles and we could cover the whole bombing raid. A bombing stream would be 60, 70 miles long, so we were covering all the bombers all the way. Also, what added to our attrition rate was the fact that the German night fighters could home onto our transmissions because we were using their frequencies. And that added to our attrition rate, which at the start of the Battle of Berlin in early '44, our attrition rate was 62%. And you realise how lucky you are. But the Germans got this equipment on the first raid that was used in September '43, where one of our aircraft was shot down and crashed, and the Germans got the equipment, had the equipment. But they knew what it did, but they couldn't, even their telephone experts couldn't work out the technicalities of the electronics on it. So it was, they knew what it was and they knew what it was doing, but their radar, well, the German radar at the beginning of the war was far in advance of ours. They had the Würzburg and Freya, and I think, if you remember, they sent a party of Marines over to try and capture the Würzburg radar set to see what it was all about. This was the beginning of the war. And with those, the chap called Carl Cam Huber, arranged that the whole of the west coast of Europe would be covered by fighters. And he divided their west coast right into 5 boxes, and each of those boxes controlled their own fighters. So if anybody came over their area, they didn't have to send anywhere to get some other fighters. They had their own fighters there. And with that equipment, they had what they called Wildesau and Samsau. And any German-speaking folk?
Wild pig.
Wild boar and tame boar. Yeah, so we call wild boar and tame boar. And with the tame boar, with the wild boar aircraft, with wild boar equipment, they could send a fighter into the bomber stream, because with their Würzburg and Freya, they knew we were taking off, they knew the height we were flying, they knew the speed we were flying, they knew the course we were flying, but they didn't know where we were going. So, well, they knew exactly where we were. So with the tame boar, wild boar, we could send the ME-109, Focke 190s, ME-109s into the bomber stream, and they could sort out their own bomber. Very, very effective indeed. But they also developed the tame boar, which is with the tame boar aircraft, which were nearly ME-110s and Ju-88s. They could put that fighter more or less directly onto an aircraft, because they had what they called the radar on the front, Liechtenstein radar on the front of the aircraft. You see some of these German fighters with all these radar on the front. That was Liechtenstein, and that could home directly onto you, and that was quite effective, very effective indeed. And with their radar, they had what they called controlled armament with the Ju-88 and predicted flak and predicted searchlights. And with the predicted flak, they could send this group of shells up, which was quite characteristic. They used to put box fighters in, and all the shells would be going off in this big box, and you had to fly through it. But with the controlled guns, Ju-88 and the ME-105, they could put the shells directly onto an aircraft. And if you were lucky enough to see the shells burst, which was quite characteristic burst of yellow shells behind you, you knew what it was, the gunners knew what it was, so he turned off 45 degrees, flew for 42 seconds. It took 45 seconds to get the next bunch of shells up, so he flew for 42 seconds, turned back 90 degrees, and hoped the next shells burst behind you. And we did that for 40 minutes one night, just dodging the flak all the way. And that was quite a concern. The navigators didn't like that at all. So with their predicted searchlights, they had the same thing. You'd be flying along nice, quite peacefully, and you'd see this big blue searchlight starting to do that. And you knew it was looking for somebody, and when it picked you up, chomp, got onto you. And all the searchlights round about, 30, 40 searchlights, it was just like flying in daylight. And you could take evasive action to fly through it, and that was nearly another 40 minutes getting rid of those. I caused a bit of hilarity one night in debriefing when they said, what happened? I said, well, we were attacked by searchlights over Hamilton. But it really was, once they got you like that, the fighters got in amongst you, and it really was chaos. So that's the sort of thing that went on. And with this equipment we had, the Germans had a name for it, and they called it Dudelsack. Dudelsack? Bagpipes? It had this wigwam noise. And so the air industry knew that we were flying this equipment. Of course, they had to. And this chappie Buffton wrote to air industry saying, in the view of simplicity and brevity, an all future airborne cigar aircraft will be known as ABC in future. So WWII Squadron became the ABC of the RAF. And it was the only squadron to be fitted with that, and we were the only squadron operating this thing. Hence, our attrition rate was so high. So that's the sort of thing that went on operations. And if I may, I'll go through what sort of thing that happened on a day of an operation. Well, all this was night flying, so we're all flying in the dark. Well, mainly in the dark, moonlight sometimes. But we got up in the morning, and you went up to the flights, and on the wall you had a battle order. That's the battle order, and that's a little bit. Tell you about that a little. So you saw when soon you went to the crew room, you saw the battle order, and you saw your name on the battle order, and the first thing you did was go and change your underwear. So, yes, you start to get a little bit apprehensive. And from then on, all the battle order told you was it told you that you were flying, told you your aircraft you're flying, told you your crew, and the time of briefing. And that's all. You didn't know where you were going, no idea where you were going. So you had to go out to the flights to check up, see if the aircraft was okay. So we went out and saw the ground crew, a wonderful ground crew, I said to Jock, I said, what's the petrol load and what's the bomb load? If you had a lot of petrol and not so many bombs, you knew you were going a long way, and vice versa. If you had lots of bombs and not so much petrol, you knew you weren't going so very far. So you had an idea what sort of raid was going to be. And then when the next thing you went and had your flying meal, we were spoiled a bit, bacon and eggs. And I think the rationing was 2 ounces of bacon a week and 1 egg, whether it was good or bad. So we were spoiled. We had this bacon and eggs, you know. So yes, we were a bit spoiled. We even had sheets on the bed, which is uncommon. So yeah, having had your pre-op meal, you went to the briefing, the main briefing. The navigators had been a little bit of briefing beforehand because they had to draw their charts. So all the crews met in the main briefing, and rooms not much bigger than this. On the wall at the end was a map of Europe with a curtain drawn over. And when they drew the curtain back, that's when you saw the red line. This is a... Oops, sorry, I shouldn't have put that there, should I? Come here. Come on to that one, didn't it? You saw the red line, and that's the first indication that you knew that you were operating, where you were going. So that's the Nuremberg one, and the other one was the Berlin one. And a wonderful book has been written by John Nichol called The Red Line, and it's all about the Nuremberg raid, which was that one. So that was the first indication you knew. And if you're going on a target like that, where the red line went the other end of the world, you know, there was a groan went up in the crews. But that's the first indication you knew. And then every section leader gave a little talk about what to expect on the way. Metman, the intelligence, army people. And I do sympathise with the Metman, because he was on a hiding to nothing. But the only weather he had from the far west, I think there were 6 weather ships, 6 ships in the Atlantic which could give weather reports. And the English ones, we had some from England, but very little from Europe, practically nothing from Europe. So he had to make a weather forecast for European weather. And it wasn't always 100% by any man. And I'll tell you about the Nuremberg raid in a minute, which was all wrong. So poor old chap, he had to make his decision on the weather, which was very reliable, but he couldn't tell you what to do with the weather. He just told you what the weather was. And on several raids we were flying through cold fronts with thunderstorms. And you just had to fly through the thunderstorms. The turbulence was quite something, with a heavy load on board, which is great. So there you are, you've got your briefing, and when you've had the main briefing, you got into the crew room to collect your parachute and get your kit on. When I got in one day to get my parachute, a little girl in the parachute section said, can I borrow your battle dress top? I said, yeah. So she took it away, she brought it back, and she'd sewn a lucky threepenny piece under my wings. You know, these are the sort of people they were on these squadrons. They were great. That helped to save my life too, that did. But, so there we are. We got our kit on, and you went out the aircraft. There was no radio contact at all, because you could have intercom on the aircraft, but you couldn't talk outside. Because if you did, the Germans could pick it up and know that there was a raid going on, and sometimes find out where you were going to. So it was complete radio silence. And you just had to go out the aircraft and wait, and what next thing you knew, they'd find a white Very light, or white Very lights, and that meant you could start up and taxi. So you got on board and taxied the big stream. Well, at the end of the runway, they had a little caravan, a little checkered caravan, and you turned onto the runway to take off, and we didn't take an awful lot of notice of it because you were too busy trying to get the aircraft off the ground. But all around the caravan at the end of the runway, there's a lot of the staff, a lot of the boys and girls from the ground staff waving you off. That was the thoughts that the people had. So, but getting off the ground was quite something. With the heavy aircraft, he just about managed to get over the hedge at the end of the runway with a bit of luck. And quite often you're flying straight into cloud. And the concentration you had to have then on flying on instruments was quite something. Sadly, more people are lost on takeoff than on ground accidents whatsoever. It was sad. We had one aircraft crashed on takeoff because of that sort of thing. And it ran into part of the bomb dump. And part of the bomb dump went up. And I'd just come off a little bit of leave, and I met the armament officer. And he was a chappie about late 20s, early 30s. His hair's going white. And I said, hey, a chap called B. I said, hey, Jeff, what's going on? He said, you wouldn't believe it. If I told you wouldn't believe it. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, when the aircraft went up and the bombed up, I got in my van, went round the perimeter track, and found this gentleman standing on the perimeter track, all badly damaged, covered in blood, who said, don't go down in there, they're all dead. He said, oh, I must. So he went down to the hut where they had been hit, and one of the dead bodies was the chap he'd been talking to on the perimeter track. And he swears blind that it was. He said, you wouldn't believe it, but it did happen. Within a fortnight, he had white hair. So this was the sort of effect that I had on these people. So that was off. You got off the ground, you got off on flying, and the first raid I went on to, I've got a touch of the Professor Mays, if you excuse me, he's going to sneeze. So then once you got airborne, off you went. And with our, you had an assembly point, and when you got airborne, because of the timing, we had to be staggered. We arranged all our distance between the, well, supposedly arranging the distance, really was very, very crude. So we joined, we had an assembly point, and then you went off into Europe. So on that takeoff, that was the most hairy time, I think, of all the flying, except when you were attacked by fighters. And on our first raid to Berlin, just crossed the Dutch coast, and we went 5 minutes, 10 minutes into Europe, and we had 5 fighter attacks, one after the other, with Ju-88s and Focke-Wulf 190s, and we had to take evasive action. And the evasive action we used to take was flying in a corkscrew pattern. You're flying along, and if the rear gunner said, "Down, starboard, go!" you didn't say why. You know, if you did, it was far too late. So what you did, if you did go starboard, you dived down starboard, and at the end you rolled back up and came back up that way. Then you rolled off the top and came down. And then with a heavy loading aircraft, that was jolly hard work. And we had to do that for about 25 minutes to get rid of these fighters. And then that's the start of the raid, then you had to carry on. We had more fighter attacks over Berlin. But that's the sort of thing we did. So that was a Berlin raid. And the Berlin raids went on until the end of March in '44. And we did have several, I did 5 raids to Berlin, and on nearly every occasion we had lots of fighter attacks. And with the diligence of my gunners, we managed to survive. If it hadn't have been for them, you know, hadn't been for the crew, we wouldn't have survived. On there they got some medals, and when you finished the tour of operations, the pilots, all the pilots got a decoration, but the crew didn't get anything, you know, and they were the ones that were telling you what to do. You had to make the final decision, of course, but if you didn't do what you were told, you know, you were in trouble. So every crew member was doing a really good job. Even my special duty operator, who was tucked down the back, never saw out at all. He saved our lives one night because the flare chute, this multi-million candle power flare chute by the back door, which we dropped, when you dropped your bombs, at times such, you had a little propeller going around on the end, that dropped just after you dropped your bombs, so that would go off at the right height to take a photograph where your bomb burst. So you had a photograph of the target. That jammed in the chute, and he just happened to look round and saw it jammed in the chute, and he went over and had a look, and there it was jammed with the propeller going around at the end. And he got the engineer to come down, and between them, the pair of them, stopped this little propeller from going round. And they couldn't get the chute, couldn't get the flare out, but they pulled it inside as far as they could and stopped the propeller. So, you know, it wasn't just a bloke sitting up front driving, it was a crew. And the crews were marvellous. My crew were wonderful. One raid we went on was to Meilly-le-Con, which was one of the transport plan targets, pre-invasion targets, which was Meilly was the biggest European military camp before the war in France, right next door to the village of Meilly. And the idea was that 5 group and 1 group were attacking the target. 5 group went in first. 10 minutes later, 1 group came in, each with 170 odd aircraft, and then called in to bomb on the target, and that was the idea. But we were briefed very, very carefully, as the pathfinders were, to say that we don't want to hit the French village, we don't want to kill French people, we've got to be very careful, be very precise. Cheshire was doing the master bomber, and he wasn't satisfied with the marking, so he said, the first raid went in, he said, don't come in and bomb, don't come in and bomb. And they were all held up. So the second wave, 1 group cut up with 5 group, and we were all milling around this beacon, waiting to be called in to go to the target. And there was something like nearly 400 aircraft just milling around in the dark. 3 German night fighter stations, and they got up amongst us, and it was mayhem. As I was saying before, complete RT silence, you must have used. But a voice came over the air, said, Pathfinders, for Christ's sake, pull your fingers out. I'm being shot at, I'm on fire. And a very broad Australian voice came over the air, said, if you're going to die, die like a man. So this sick humour went on. And we eventually called in, it was like Derby Day, all these aircraft settling down. And we just dropped our bombs, and we just closed the bomb door, and an aircraft blew up underneath us, and we were turned upside down. And I barreled a Lancaster, not deliberately. So and then this is where we are taught basically in flying, in the experiences in Canada. We knew that if you pull the stick back, you get this rapid increase of the aviation at 14 degrees, angle of attack, and you get a flick stall. You pull the mush down and you get a rapid increase and you flick stall. So we just eased it out and we came out just about 1,000 feet, going rather fast. The all-up speed of a Lancaster 360, we were just doing over 400 when we came out. But all the damage to the aircraft was a few scorch marks on the bottom and creaking a bit. But when you got sorted out, you checked upon your crew and called up with you again. Harry, all right, Harry? Yes, Cap. All right, Tommy, mid up a gunner. Yes, okay, Cap. Wallace up a little taffy. I said, oh, Harry, carry on, taffy. And all I got was blood. Oh, God, I'm through the curtain. There he was. Wiped his face. And that really turned your tummy over. But on the aircraft, we had an L-sun at the back of the aircraft, which at temperatures of, lowest temperature I had was minus 47. So if you sat on that, you left a bit behind. So you didn't use that. So the crew had a big fruit tin with the top cut off, which they passed round as a pecan. And Taffy says now, well, he can't, poor soul's dead, but he used to say, when we were upside down, you could see this pecan rising with negative gravity. He wasn't exactly favourable. And these sort of things used to happen. My first engineer couldn't cope on operations. He used to sit on the floor and shiver and shake and couldn't do a thing, had engines on fire, couldn't help. So he went, and the gentleman who was shot down the day I arrived on the squadron, his engineer didn't fly the Curly because he had the runs. And we were going off one night, and the Curly came up, he said, "Hey Skip," he said, "I've got the runs." I said, "Well, you can't fly, you know, you can't fly like." We weren't decompressed, of course, and as you went up, we didn't need an altimeter. You know, one of the lads would start passing wind at 8,000 feet, another one at 10. These are sort of things. I shan't tell you about the smell inside the aircraft. There we are, poor old Curly, he insisted on coming. It was a 7.5-hour operation, and on the way up, he just couldn't control his bowels. And of course, he defecated. They tried to clean him up, because we had portable oxygen bottles to take him down the aircraft. The engineer was taking him down the back of the aircraft with this portable oxygen bottle. And as he passed Taffy on the wireless operator, Taffy turned the cock off on his operation. Oxygen bottle. So he was 3 parts drunk by the time he got there. But that, he says that was the most degrading time he's ever experienced in his life, because they couldn't clean him up. And of course, when you got back, you just couldn't go away and get cleaned up. You had to go and be debriefing straight away before you forgot what happened. So that was, poor old, he wasn't exactly flavour of a month either. But these sort of things weren't uncommon. These happened quite a lot, not just to us, but to many, many people. So that was our little Bailey trip. Another trip we went on, whereby we were going to Munich, and it's a long trip over the Alps, very spectacular flying over the Alps, and we had a bit of problems. We lost our Peterhead, and we lost part of our port wing, and it wasn't flying very nicely, and lost most of our instruments. So we were flying back from Munich on nearly 5 hours back over to get back home, rather slowly. And when we were coming back over western France in daylight, and we saw these 2 little specks coming towards, oh God, fighters. And they were fighters, but a couple of Spitfires. And they sent out these Spitfires to escort people like myself back home. So they brought us back to Ludford, and we went down to mess, and we had quite a few jars when we got back. And they're the sort of experiences you had. And the raid that affected us more than any other was a raid on Nuremberg, and the battle order gone round the Nuremberg raid. And this was a raid, in retrospect, should never have taken place whatsoever. We've tried to find out why, and it's never been proven why. In early '44, just at the end of the Battle of Berlin, which wasn't a huge success, Harris was directed that he had to bomb transport plant targets, railway marshalling yards, troop concentration, tank depots, which he didn't like at all. He wanted to go on bombing the big cities. And I think he laid on this raid to get one last big one in. His deputy, Sorby, wasn't very sure about this at all, because he wasn't certain about the weather. This is where the poor old Metman hiding to nothing. But Harris insisted that the raid went ahead. It had already been delayed twice, anyway, we got out the aircraft. We still never expected to take off, but we had to. So off we went. We were assembling at a place called Charleroi in Belgium, and we were staggered supposedly every 90 seconds through the bomber stream, but throughout the bomber stream. And when we got to Charleroi, we turned more or less due east, which you will see on the battle order for Nuremberg, the red line, which was 265 miles, dead straight line, which was most unusual, because usually we did dog legs to give the Germans some idea of where you weren't going to go to. So there we are, we've got this long straight leg. the idea of the first meltdown was that there was a front coming down over Germany, and all this route entered onto the target would be in cloud, and the target would be open. The winds changed. Whether it was a jet stream or not, I don't know, blew all the clouds away. So we were flying this 265 miles in a third moon, and it was bright moonlight, contrails round about. And on that route, just south of the Ruhr, there's two big fighter beacons, Ida and Otto. We'd just crossed the German border, and we'd already seen 16 aircraft going down. And I told the navigator, I said, Alec, you've got to come and see this. It's amazing. He's the navigator. He sat behind his curtain. So he came and looked out the window, and he said a very rude word, something about fornicating in Hades. He went back and never ever looked out ever again. It was amazing. On this long leg, so we've already seen 16 aircraft going down, but the Germans had sent 240 fighters to cover these two beacons in more or less daylight, and they didn't need their radar, they just were picking us off right, left and centre. On this long leg, it took roughly, with the wind behind us, we were doing about 180 knots, it took just about an hour, and on that long leg there were 61 aircraft shot down. So that's 1 a minute all the way along that leg. Aircraft were just falling out of the sky. And with the diligence of my gunners, we managed to stay safe. One of our pilots, a chap called Todd, Flight Lieutenant Todd, he was on this raid, and he was asked to take a very senior officer who was rather religious, very religious man. So when he got back, this chap could tell people what it was like on operational flying. So he got it mixed up with all these fighters, and his rear gunner called up. He said, "Hey, Toddy," he said, "there's loads of fighters." He said, "The bastards are everywhere." And this very religious voice from front of the aircraft said, "Never fear, rear gunner, never fear, the good Lord is with us." And the rear gunner came back, he said, "It might be up your bloody end, there's no sign of it." Toddy told us about this when we got back. He survived the war, poor Toddy. But when we got to Nuremberg, there weren't very many markers there at all. There weren't many aircraft there, because the wind was such that the aircraft were scattered all over the place. One of the Pathfinder aircraft had been shot down and crashed at Schweinfurt, which wasn't so far away from Nuremberg, and having his ground flares, marker flares, go up when he crashed, 100 bombers were bombing Schweinfurt. So instead of having 720 aircraft bombing Nuremberg, there's only about 300 or 400. The Pathfinders had been given ground markers, expecting the target to be clear. A few had sky markers, but when they dropped the sky markers over Nuremberg in the cloud, with the wind, these were blown about 10 miles away to the east. And some of the poor old farmers over there, their farms were bombed. It was a bit of luck, there was an ammunition train there. They hit an ammunition train, this went up. And on the way back, there's another 20 aircraft shot down on the way back, coming back. My crew, no, they're nutters. My navigator ran a kitty. And then all the crew put a few pennies in the kitty. Didn't include me, I don't know why. But they put a few pennies in the kitty. And the one who guessed the most accurately, the most aircraft shot down, won the kitty. And my engineer, Curly, when he got back, he said, "Must be 60 to 100. And he won the kitty that night. Because on that raid, we lost 97 over Germany. Many more were lost by crashes in England, and the Air Ministry have never yet issued a proper figure of how many were lost that night. The Pathfinders reckon it must be about 160, 170. The figures that the Air Ministry sought to put out was about 120. So when you think of these figures, 120 aircraft, seven people on board, all those aircrew lost. was that night. Our squadron, we sent 26 aircraft and we lost 7. That's 26 aircraft, that's about 210 aircrew, and we lost just over 60. And that was nearly a third of the squadron that night, just from one night. It was amazing. When we got back, the intelligence people really didn't believe the thought we were telling porkies and making things up, until the results came in, and we were like zombies. Normally, on a raid, there's a lot of relaxation time. You weren't in panic all the time, but on this particular raid, your mind was concentrating all the time for 8 hours. We were 8 hours, 20 minutes to flight took, for 8 hours. And when you got back, the unwinding was almost impossible. We were like zombies. We couldn't concentrate at all. When we got back to our billets, you just sat on the bed, didn't sleep that night. Nobody did. It was the most peculiar sensation. When we got down to get our post-operational meal, the WAFs in the mess weren't there. They'd left the meals out with a little note saying, please help yourselves. And they were in the restroom at the back, bemoaning the fact of all their friends and sweethearts they'd lost. And the WAF officer who was in charge of the mess said, look, when you come in, don't all spread at your own tables, all sit at the one table. So he didn't see a lot of empty tables. So that was the Nuremberg raid, which really was a disaster. And to finish off with, one raid I went on was to the Ruhr, to Essen, and it wasn't a long trip, it was about 5 hours, but flying in towards the target, the old saying, the flak was so thick you could get out and walk on it, and it really looked impossible. And for the first time in our life, I experienced terror and panic, and I started to shake, my knees started to shake, I was sweating, the needles were being pushed into my head. So I dropped the seat so I couldn't see out, and I said a little prayer. Why? I don't know. There's a little prayer I said, what Mum and Dad used to say by the side of my bed when I was 6 years old, and I've never said it since. It's a little prayer which is quite a common one. Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul will keep. And if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul will take. And I said that little prayer. Why? I don't know. But all this terror and all this panic disappeared. I was able to raise my seat and carry on quite normally. We had that experience on other operations later on, and I never experienced that panic or terror ever again. So the power of prayer, it's all up here. So there we are, that's the sort of thing that happened on these bombing raids. But thinking of the casualties in the Air Force, the statistician in 1944 just reckoned of what happened to 100 aircrew. So of that 100 aircrew, just imagine you're 100 aircrew, 51 were killed on operations. So all units. 8 were shot down and shot down and were killed when they got back. Started crashed when they got back. So say perhaps another 2 ladies there would, I'm sorry. And, 13 bailed out, and some were captured, but they were lost as far as operational comes. So say another 3, say the rest of you down here, you're not operational. 1 escaped and evaded, came back to operate. Say you escaped, you have. And out of that 100, you're the only ones who are left to serve. Nearly everybody had some mental or physical ailment afterwards. I'm old right now, I think. No, he did have problems. So that's the sort of thing that happened in Bomber Command. Our group, every month, our group lost 70 aircraft, 70 Lancasters. Every bomber station lost something like 900 aircraft. Our squadron lost over 1,400. So these figures are quite amazing when you think of it. And really, looking back, you realised how lucky you were. When I did my last operation, I had the Winkle the group captain had me in his office, and on the wall he had a crew statistics chart. Drew the curtain back. He said, there you are, woman. He said, you're the first crew that finished in your flight for nearly 6 months. So, and you realise how bloody lucky you are. And I'm lucky to be here tonight. Sorry.
Tell me about your collisions.
Pardon?
Your collision.
Oh yeah, oh yes, we had. He shouldn't be, he does those though. Yes, on the way to Hasselt in Belgium, again a transport plan target, near railway marshal yards on the German border. We just crossed over into Belgium and we had a mid-air collision. This other aircraft slid underneath us. His canopy, top canopy, was torn off, took off our starboard wing. His mid-upper turret carved through our fuselage just behind the bomb bays, made a big hole right across the aircraft. Took part of her tail off. His propellers carved through our bomb aimer's compartment just behind his feet, and it was rather drafty. And unfortunately, the other aircraft broke. I didn't see it, but it fell off and damaged, and it was crashed in Belgium. And when I got back, I had to write a report on what happened. And they said, give it a title of the most vivid thing that happened when you were flying. And when we were flying, when he slid underneath us, we were sitting on top of him, and all our controls just went completely limp. So I gave it a title, it went limp in my hand. That was altered. But that was the experience it was. It was quite frightening. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to Belgium because the team research people in Belgium had found where the other aircraft had crashed. And I was taken to see the site and shown the place where the other crew were found. They all died, and they couldn't find the engineer, because what they suspect is when they took the canopy off, the engineer would be standing by the window, and he must have been just thrown out when we had the collision. So that was quite a memorable occasion. Quite made you think. Yeah. Thinking of that sort of thing, I was on the Berlin airlift, and 1999, on the 50th anniversary of the end of the airlift, we were invited, anybody who'd been on the airlift, were invited by the Berliners to go and have 4 days, all expenses paid in Germany. They took us on a tour around the walls, and they stopped by one little place, and they were just rebuilding Berlin from Bonn, moving the capital back up. And I said to this young lady, I said, they're not doing very much to mend that church out there, are they? He said, no, they're keeping that as a memorial to the 360 children who were killed when it was bombed. And he suddenly realised, I could have done that. So that's the sort of thing that happens, and that sort of affects it out. But basically, I'm all right now. Still got 4 of my crew alive, all invalids, but until 1990, all 8 of us used to meet, and there's only a few years now, the last few years, that 3 of them had died. Little Tuffy died, I miss him. He became one of my best friends. Amazing little man. So there we are, that's if I may.
Thank you, Rusty. Am I right? Rusty, am I right?
Can I sit down?
Yeah, please do. Yeah. Am I right in thinking that after your mid-air collision you actually carried on?
Yes. We found because our engines were he was slightly behind us, so our engines were in front of his, so our engines were all right, and the bomb aimer and the engineer went back, looked through the little window to see that all the bombs were all right, and they found that mechanically they could open the bomb bays, so we went on and bombed. We bombed the marshalling yards, some marshalling yards, about 4.5 miles north of the target. But coming back, again, you know, the aircraft would have, had we taken evasive action, the aircraft would have broken up. And I said to Harry, the rear gunner, get your parachute, Harry, and come up front. If you're going to take any violent action, it'll break up. So come in. He said, no, I'll stop here and take a look after you. These are the sort of people the crew were. On the Nuremberg trip, it was 8.5 hours. He had a Sidcup suit, which is an electric heated suit. His electricity had failed on the way out. Never said a peep, never said a word. When we got back, he didn't get out the aircraft. And when I went to get him out, open his little door, he couldn't move. He had an icicle from his face mask as thick as my wrist down between his legs. And that affected him for the rest of his life. He was in hospital for 3 weeks with a frostbitten face. Amazing. But say down between the he must have been awful. It didn't do him any great damage as far as his body was concerned, because he went back to Canada and had 8 children. Sorry about all
Thank you, Rusty. Would anyone like to ask Rusty a question? Yes, sir.
I think you answered it earlier, but I read once that a Lancaster, it may have been 617 Squadron, had barrel rolled a Lancaster to avoid fighter.
Could
and
well
it was
have
said
done,
it was impossible. But
Yeah.
you obviously said it was.
Yeah, it can be done. Well, it says a lot for the aircraft. I only know, that's the first time I've heard of that, but I only knew one of the test pilots on an empty aircraft had actually barrel rolled in test flying. So it could be done. Well, it was a wonderful aeroplane. It really was. Took enormous damage. Tremendous damage.
Still is.
Yeah, thank you.
Rusty, when the sort of collision again, when you landed, you did actually crash the plane.
Yeah, oh yes, we had a little crash when we got back. And when we had one wheel, but that wasn't much good. And we had Fido. Fortunately, the dud wheel went to be in the gap between the Fido pipes. The other one just bounced over the top. And in the dark, we were skidding towards the control tower, and there was a casualty that night, because all the people in the a lot of the folk in the control tower came out on the balcony to see this idiot Bundy's aeroplane, and one of the little girls jumped back and sprained her ankle.
How many missions did you have to do? How many missions before you could actually retire?
30.
Right.
Yeah. It usually did 30 operations. That was a tour of operations. And usually you had 6 months rest and went back on and did the second tour. Most of my crew did second tours. Bomber ended up on Pathfinders. I was due to go back in early February 45, but by that time the attrition rate had dropped drastically, so they had a glut of pilots. A lot of pilots were coming off training, so they didn't want any more pilots, operational pilots. So I was sent down to Bomber Command Instructor School to become an instructor. So I ended instructing on would-be's. Yes, sir.
I've often wondered what it sounded like on board. I can imagine being very noisy. You're wearing headphones,
Yeah.
and you've got the sound of the engines, but
Yeah.
when you've got machine guns, can you hear flak? What kind of noises are you hearing?
If the flak was close enough, yes, you could hear it. Also, you could hear the clatter of shrapnel coming onto your aircraft. There you go. Like that. That's a bit of flak that came into the aircraft. And he didn't pick it up.
Oh, much heavier than I thought.
It was very hard when it came in. But I think that was a bit spent, because it just came. I must have been leaning forward. Came through where my head.
Ever come up against a light fighter built by Heinkel called the 219, the Owl? Did you ever come up against a German night fighter built by Heinkel, the Heinkel 219?
No, that was one of the later ones.
Yes.
Which was one of the
Really
better.
deadly.
That was it. Had they brought that in a bit earlier, it would have made a big difference. Was it? Yeah, it was a wonderful aeroplane.
Yes.
And they had some very extensive radar on board. But with this Liechtenstein radar, they could tune into our frequencies. So we devised a system called Monica, where we could counteract their radar, and they devised a system Flensburg, which they could tune into our countermeasure for the The radar war was quite considerable. It was quite frightening when you look back at it, how on earth we survived. I don't know. But the German radar really was superb, far in advance of ours at the beginning of the war. Frightening. Yes, sir.
Hello. Do you, like during the entire time that you were doing all your missions and such, do you know whether any of your gunners ever shot down an enemy fighter?
Yeah. When we were on this Nuremberg raid, one of the 16 aircraft we saw shot down was a Ju-88. So we knew that one of the German aircraft was lost. The Germans were losing a lot of aircraft. Just imagine the German fighter attacking from dead astern. He had 20mm cannons, we had 4 303s, 4 rifles. And they used to fire straight into the aircraft. Quite often they hit the bomb dump, hit the bomb bay in the whole lot of them, and they were flying into the whole street. And they were losing quite a lot of aircraft. But one very astute German said, well, let's put the guns pointing upwards. So instead of having the guns straight on, they had some guns pointing upwards, which they called Schlager music, jazz music or slanted music, and they could fly underneath us. And I met one of the German night fighter pilots, not quite a few years ago now, and he said, oh, we were very kind. We didn't fire the fuselage. We flew inboard of the engines, the inboard engine and the fuselage, where the main fuel tanks were, to hit the end, hit the fuel tanks, and it would all explode up. And he knew that he was true. He said, we're being very kind, we're not shooting at you. And they were very sympathetic. At the end of the war, I was in Transport Command. We used to fly to Europe quite a lot, and we went up at northern Germany, in Lubeck, and we used to wander out in the forest, Lubeck forest. And there I met a woodcarver, German woodcarver, who gave me a cuckoo clock. And we got to know him quite well. And his nephew came to join him when I was there, and got talking to him. And he was said, you're about the same age as me. What did you do during the war? He said, oh, I was 109, ME 109 fighter pilot. I said, night fighters? He said, yeah. And he was on the same race as I was on. And we chatted and talked about each other's lives quite normally. And I've subsequently been to Germany quite a lot in flying, and met so many nice people. And I've met some people down in Stuttgart who still keep in touch with even now. And they had tough wars just like we had. So it was the ordinary people there did have a rough time, very rough time. And this family in Stuttgart, their father had to join the Wehrmacht, otherwise they wouldn't have got any rations. So it wasn't as simple as we sometimes think it is. Thank you.
One last question. Tom, you had a question?
Yes.
After the war, how long did you serve in the RAF?
I was, again, it's not a long story, but I stayed in the Air Force after the war. Started off from Bomber Command Instructing School in Strictly on Wellingtons, and then I was transferred to Transport Command, whereby I was flying Dakotas and Violettas, and I was posted. I was on at Oakington, where we had 4 squadrons on the Berlin airlift, and I was sent on the Berlin airlift for a month to have a rest, because everybody had to be fully categorised, and I was kept quite busy getting all the things, and the current instrument rating, so I was kept very busy. And the boss said, have a few days off and go on the airlift for a month and have a rest. So I said, do I go home or do I go and see my fiancée? Because he guessed what I did. I went to see my fiancée because I was getting married in the October. I went on the Berlin, I was in the airlift. I'd been on the airlift for a fortnight, and I was called into the office and said, your father's died. Hindsight, what should I have done? But I married Pat in October 1948, and we'd been married 3 or 4 years, and she started to become quite ill, quite poorly. And my mum, who's been a nurse, matron in a nurse military hospital, said she can't last very long. So I resigned my commission. I was supposed to be staying in until 1960, but I resigned my commission to come and look after her, on the condition that I renewed my qualification every year, which I did for 2 years at Marshall's. And then they said, well, we're running out of money and they've got squirty things now and haven't got fans on the front anymore. So I was just on the reserve until 1960. So, but my first wife, she died 10 months after I resigned. But I couldn't get back in again because they were running out of money and they got plenty of pilots. So her father very kindly said, come and work for me. So I travelled the country in cardboard boxes.
Not ladies' underwear.
You did fly Meteor, didn't you? You did fly Meteor once.
Oh, I flew a Meteor once, that's peacetime. I frightened myself to death. I was flying at Abingdon on 30 Squadron, which was a VIP squadron, and I was the training examining officer on the squadron. And one of our lads, Aki, he was posted, sent off on the same station to the ferry unit on the same station. And the qualifications I had, it seems ridiculous now. If on any aircraft, if I was given the pilot's notes, I could read the pilot's notes and go and fly the airplane. Because the theory of flight stays the same whatever you're flying. So he said, hey, we've got a Meteor, do you want to go and fly the Meteor? Yes. I said, never flown it yet. He said, there's the pilot's notes. I read the pilot's notes and off we went. Taking off, the acceleration compared to what we have. And normally on the transport aircraft was sitting 20, 30 feet up in the air. This was down here on the ground. So I managed to get it off the ground all right. And by the time I found the undercarriage lever, the aerodrome was a tiny little It was wonderful to fly, really was wonderful to fly. But landing was a problem. I was coming in still trying to land at 20 feet up in the air. I had 3 attempts at landing. I don't know who was the most worried to put it on the ground on myself. But, it really was a wonderful experience, it really was. And a wonderful aeroplane to fly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rusty.
Thank you, sir.
Before you go, please do put some money in the collection boxes. We'll generate some good from this. But finally, thank you very much for coming to us. I think all of us owe your generation a huge debt of gratitude for what you did.
Well, I'm only one of many. I'm the lucky one that's still here. And if this sort of thing can remind you and to remember all the poor souls who aren't here anymore, were killed in duty, you know, that's I think. Thank you very much.